Well, before the end of World War I, what motivated Britain to get into the Middle East was, in fact, before the end of the World War. This was the spring and the summer of 1916. And the trench war on the Western Front was going very, very badly for Britain, with huge numbers of casualties. And so the idea came to mind that they would shift the front eastward. And a proposal came from the General Staff to the Prime Minister Lloyd George to begin a campaign in Palestine. And their policy, their Middle East policy, began then. And that is to make a lot of promises to a lot of people. One of the major promises and the consequences we feel to this day was to the Arabs. Here the promise was made to the Sharif Hussein, who was the guardian of the holy mosques, that in exchange for an Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire, the British would grant independence to the Arabs in the Middle East. As we know, the British really never had the intention of delivering on that promise. On the other hand, and here I don't want to say more importantly, but just as important, was a British promise to the Jewish people, the Balfour Declaration, a promise by Sir Arthur Balfour to create a homeland, a home, in fact, a national home for the Jewish people in the land of Palestine. Most Israelis will refer to these words as the legal basis for the creation of Israel. What they do forget is to read the rest of the text, which is to say that in no way should this prejudice the non-Jewish inhabitants of Palestine. Their religious or civil rights should not be impeded. And here what is outrageous, of course, is that the non-Jewish population of Palestine constituted 92% of the people. Theodor Herzl, Chaim Weizmann, another Zionist leader who later became the first president of Israel, and others of the Jewish elite knew that there was another population. But in their minds, they chose to look the other way. And when confronted by others, including British parliamentarians, including people like Lord Montagu, who was responsible in the wording of the Balfour Declaration to say that this should not cause any prejudice to the civil and religious rights of non-Jewish people. When reminded that there was a people in the land of Palestine, they would retort that these Arabs living there would benefit very much from the financial investments we are going to make. They are going to be very happy. They are going to be in a much better lot than they are now. It wasn't until the second Aliyah, one that was far more serious. It was led by those who had participated in the revolutionary struggle of Russia, Jewish socialists such as Ben-Gurion, who had made it such that the Jewish National Fund, funded by Baron de Rothschild to colonize the land, that the work would only be for Jews and by Jews, to exclude Arabs from any participation in any activity, that the Jews needed to engage in avodah ivrit, which is self-reliance. They needed to rely upon themselves. But it didn't take a very long time for the local people to understand that this was a foreign imperialist wave coming to take over their land. In 1948, 15th of May, Israel unilaterally declares its independence. The Arab countries try to lend a hand to the Palestinians, but we have to remember that these countries, whether Lebanon or Syria or Jordan, had just become independent. They had no armies to speak of. In the case of Syria, its army was less than 10,000 fighters with very, very rudimentary equipment. On the other hand, the Yishuv, the Jews, were far better organized, far better equipped, and they had a cause to defend. They were very highly motivated. So as a result, all in all, there was the Nakba, a catastrophe that befell the Palestinians, and the Israelis in that war took more land than was appropriated to them by the United Nations. The appropriation of the United Nations, the partition of Palestine, was also a joke. It was also outrageous, giving a small number of the Yishuv 55% of Palestine, whereas the Palestinians, who were the majority of the population, got 45% of the territory. Naturally, having been there for centuries, the Palestinians refused this partition. So did the Arabs. When it went to vote in the United Nations, those, of course, states who were at the United Nations were for the most part Western states who had been thoroughly lobbied by the Zionists. There were no third world states at the time. Most of them were colonized, and so the vote obviously was imbalanced. But later still, Israel continued in its aggressive mode of behavior, and Israel does this because it can, because it has the power. It has the military power that is sustained by the United States. It has the diplomatic power that is sustained by the United States and others. And so we have an Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1978. We have another Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982. And we have really an Israel that is armed to the teeth and that is in constant violation of all sorts of international laws, is in violation of all sorts of United Nations resolutions. Until today, it has not fulfilled its requirements under Resolution 242 of 1967, or of 338, or of 339, all of which require Israel to withdraw from the territories it occupied. Israel defies the entire international community by building settlements in occupied territory, although this is clearly in violation of international law and in violation of the Geneva Convention. Again, because it can. It has the power. If the Arabs don't like it, go drink the ocean. The balance of power is extremely lopsided. Israel is a very powerful state. It is more powerful than any combination of Arab power. On the other hand, the Palestinians have next to nothing. And so in this situation, to talk about a two-state solution is almost funny if it weren't sad. And it seems to me that we will not have a Palestinian state next week or next month.